Tonight on Ship Chasing, we put a bow on all of the playoff contests. We even have the FFPC Playoff Challenge champ, Toyo, swinging by. He's going to tell us how we did it. We'll break down how our portfolio shook out across all of our playoff contests, as well as get a kickoff preview from Ben Gretch on the Omni Fantasy contest for 2024. It's Ship Chasing. Let's do it.
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight.
Jamar. Alpha play chase.
Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally this boys. You're right.
All right. Ben Gretch, Pat Carrain. Been a while since we have done a show. Did you guys have fun Super Bowl viewing experiences?
Yeah, it was good. I was rooting for the Chiefs. Glad to see him. Glad to see Mahomes get another ring. Rooting for our buddy Davis. After they win, it's inevitable.
Yeah, exactly. Where did you watch the game, Gretch?
I was at a buddy's house. I have older kids for kids my age. Most of my friends, we're all similar ages, but most of my friends have kids that are like in the 2 to 5 year old range, and so there's a lot of 2 to 5 year olds running around. I brought my 8-year-old with me, but my 12-year-old hung back with mom, and so anyway, they had a lot of fun playing. There was more of a family atmosphere over there, but I mean, I was definitely talking ball. My buddies, they're not like huge football fans, but they like to talk football. But I mean, I can't help myself, so I'm just like going way too in the weeds on stuff, and they're like, "Yeah, definitely, yeah, for sure." One of my closest buddies made a pretty funny joke at one point where he was like, "Yeah, no, I totally knew that." I made some comment about Mecole Hardman and Richie James because how they have the jersey numbers, and every time Richie James returns a punt, and it's number 17. For a second, you're like, "Oh, that's Mecole Hardman." He's like, "Oh yeah, no, totally." That's what I was thinking too about Mecole Hardman and Richie James. I was like,
yeah,
just like talking to myself.
I was watching with Rudman. With a lot of people, but I was right next to Rudman, and he's a massive Patriots fan, and so his macro rooting interest was he wanted the Chiefs to lose because he doesn't want any of the discourse to ever be Mahomes is better than Brady.
Because that's all Brady has in the discourse. Let's be honest; it's just another ring. That's the only thing left.
Hey,
you better hold on to that ring lead, Brady.
But there was a really funny moment where like Rudman basically was like. It was one of the game-winning drive or whatever, and he's like, "Look, if Mahomes does it, I'll tip my cap, but otherwise he's a complete fraud." It was like so binary. It's like, "I'll tip my cap if he does it, but otherwise he's dead." He did it. Spoiler alert. He did it. Shout out to everyone hanging in the chat with us tonight. We got Sacrilegious member for 13 months. Maverick shouting out all the content on Leg Up. Definitely got to mention that. You guys had a ton of people using those rankings, won contests, won tournaments. Pat, what did you win? The Big Mitten?
Big Mitten.
Nice.
Yeah. That was
work.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun. I got it was actually wild because MSOS, who's in the Discord and everything, and is a very good best ball player, was in second for most of the Super Bowl in the Big Mitten. He had MVS though, so he passed me at one point for first. And then we also had so much of the same team that it was possible if Rashee Rice were to catch that touchdown instead of Mecole, I think we would have tied. Wow. So I wanted my pure rooting interest for that tournament was the game to end as soon as possible, but I really did want the Chiefs to win. So I was like, I don't want to have to sweat this anymore, but I'm rooting for overtime. I'm rooting for. So I got the best of both worlds where I actually was still able to get Kelsey to outscore MVS, which is what I needed. I need him to outscore Rice and MVS, and the Chiefs win. So hit that little parlay.
There you go.
I wasn't obviously deep in the playoff best ball streets because I can't do it here. I drafted a few teams, but did I catch something where like a big part of why Leg Up subscribers were crushing was Mecole Hardman? Were people on Mecole a little bit?
We were team get additional like pieces of the offenses that you're betting on, But I don't think we were pushing Mecole specifically.
Oh, Jawan Jennings was.
Jawan was who you guys
Jennings,
were pushing. Yes.
We pushed a lot of Jawan Jennings.
I started drafting Ronnie Bell because I was sick of drafting Jawan Jennings. I told him at that. I was like, I can't keep taking Jawan Jennings in every goddamn draft.
That's
big game for Jawan Jennings. Whew.
Yeah, what a game. It's crazy to see something theoretical play out like that cleanly.
I know.
Yeah.
I talked about it on my portfolio review because I had a dead team that made the Gauntlet finals and it had CMC and Jawan Jennings, and I still finished middle of the pack just because of having Jawan Jennings, which is ridiculous. But yeah, it'll be fun to run it back again next year and to actually see how much does the field catch up. You know, obviously it's going to be slightly better, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't like a giant leap forward just because
I think it might be similar to this year again.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm thinking that is that it was really hard to advance. If the Chiefs hadn't won, it would have been so hard to advance like the teams that you actually wanted in the Super Bowl. And you can talk yourself into like, I just need to find Aaron Jones and Jake Ferguson and, you know, like getting those guys to advance you. Or the Lions guys, like just finding the guys to get there. People always want to have a sweat. They always want to advance and live to see another day. It's a natural bias if you're in these tournaments. You don't want to get bounced. So I think that the idea of no draft like my team was all Chiefs and 49ers plus Brandon Cooks and Ferguson. It advanced by 1 point in round 3. I mean, in many worlds, it doesn't even make the final. And I'm just like, oh, you know, that's my whole sweat. So I think it's just like it's tough for people to want to build a team like that because it's just such a bummer when it gets bounced before the final, and it will get bounced before the final because you're keeping it really lean so that when it gets to the final, it has huge equity to actually take it down.
Yeah, and there ended up being what, like a 36-way chop or something around that for the Gauntlet.
For the Gauntlet, yeah.
Which still very nice payday. I think it was like 14.5K or something for everyone. So you're not turning your nose up at that, despite getting hella duped. Let's see. So tonight we're gonna have Zach Toyo, who shipped the FFPC Playoff Challenge, and I believe shipped one of the FFPC Best Ball contests.
No, he did. He shipped. He shipped back-to-back playoff or FFPC tournaments.
Insane.
What?
Yeah. So we're going to have him swing by here probably next 25 minutes or so. We'll get to hear from him. Not familiar with him at all. So excited to get to know him a bit more. We'll talk a little bit about our FFPC Playoff Challenge portfolio when he comes by, but I did want to carve out some time now to talk about Omni Fantasy, Gretch, which I've gotten some of the updates in my inbox, and I know you're gearing up for a big year. Lots of improvements on the tech side too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, every year we talk about this. I'm like, how do you start talking about Omni Fantasy? We added some things to the site that needed to be done. We definitely have some feature upgrades that needed to be done. We had a lot. The biggest one, the huge one, was to not make Twitter be the only login source, because we've always had it linked through Twitter for simplicity, and so that we're not like capturing, passwords and those types of things. But obviously Twitter is not the healthiest social media site in the world.
This is right now. Omni Fantasy you play for a full year, so you'd like your login to
in the last year, a lot of people have been like, hey, I deactivated my Twitter and now I can't access Omni Fantasy. It's like, all right, well, we got to find a solution for this. So we got email links. We got finally have along with that, we'll have email push notifications when you're on the clock, which in the past we've all had to ping each other, which has been, a little bit of a headache.
Hang on. You ping me is how that works.
Yes, I ping Karain constantly. Every time he's like 6 times every time he's up.
I've never pinged you.
But yeah, no, we have a lot of stuff. Added some new sports. Man, I should have actually prepared to talk about this instead of, trying to wing it. But we added women's college basketball this year, which is cool. Caitlin Clark just a few minutes ago became the highest scoring women's college basketball player of all time. Happened tonight. We're breaking this news live on Ship Chasing You can pick her Iowa Hawkeyes to win the women's college basketball championship this year. They're not even the favorites. So it's pretty wide open. Women's college basketball is pretty sweet right now. So it's a really fun addition for Omni Fantasy. We also added, Euro, which is like the World Cup, but every 2 years offset from the World Cup. It's just European countries, but for soccer, it's a non-annual soccer tournament, nations, not club, but national soccer tournament. And then we added cricket, which Hassan has asked about in the past. I have another buddy who has a wife from Australia, and he's played Omni Fantasy since the first year we've done it. He's one of my college buddies, and her whole family's really into cricket. It was pretty fun to dig into that a little bit. We just finished our longest running draft and digging into cricket. It's like there's like 7 nations that are super into it that have good odds, but it's also pretty open at that point. But then it does fall off from that point, but there's not like a clear favorite is my point. So it's not like we tried F1 a couple years ago, and we still have on the site, but it won't be a part of the Omni Fantasy Cup because it's too predictable. That's not an issue with cricket necessarily, but there are only like 7 legitimate contenders. That's kind of what it comes down to. It's like India, Pakistan. You do have England, but a lot of it's Southeast Asia. India, Pakistan, Australia's in it. New Zealand is really good. You have the West Indies, which is like all the Caribbean nations come together, and they're really good. And part of the cool thing about the cricket and why he talked me into adding it this year, my buddy, is that the U.S. and the West Indies are co-hosting. So some of these massive World Cup cricket matchups this year are going to be like at the Meadowlands, I think, or not at the Meadowlands. Cool. There's a cricket stadium in New York, New Jersey. But yeah, like some of these cool locations. So anyway, we have the men's T20 World Cup. I don't know anything about cricket, but that's also
I saw a cricket
included.
match one time in Australia.
Did you? How was it?
Yeah, the beer was great.
I
had no idea what was happening.
In Gretch, for people who aren't familiar, if someone's like, okay, that's nice that Hassan has cricket, I don't want to do cricket, you can pick which sports you want if you're spinning up your own league.
Right. There's a few awesome things. If you're spinning up your own league with other people, you can do that. You don't have to include cricket. If you're playing in the Omni Fantasy Cup, which is one of the things we want to talk about here, Pete put it in the chat. The last ship chasing comment in there has the sign up for that. That's going to be a whole bunch of 8-team leagues, sort of like, a really mini best ball mania, right? I've compared it to like the Scott Fish Bowl before because there's not like huge prizes or anything. We're not playing for money because we can't like legally. But we have the winner from last year was Paul V from the Deposit Kingdom chat. We do a prize for the winner, so he's going to get 2 tickets to go see whatever sporting event he wants to see. Last year was Anthony, another ship chaser, won, and he went to I think there was the New Hampshire, like the NASCAR race in New Hampshire.
Really?
So he said it was his first ever NASCAR race, which is kind of cool. And then he finished 3rd this year out of 128 people. He almost went back to back. He banked it in 2020. Yeah. So he's the guy to watch, I think.
Gretch, you need to get an Omni Fantasy, merch and have them. Then he shoots the vlog, and so he's at the race doing promotion for Omni Fantasy. How did you end up here? Well, let me tell you a story.
There's a lot of really good things we could do with it. The problem is, as always, we've never known how to monetize this. It's just a side project that takes up way too much of my time right now. I would love to do a lot of that kind of stuff. I did have him take pictures, and I was like, eventually maybe we'll have a Hall of Fame and we'll want to have some pictures from these events. So I had him take pictures of the first one. I'll have Paul do the same thing so we can at least document these, these first Omni Fantasy Cup champion events and trips that they get to go to. But yeah, anyway, what I was going to say is if you do sign up for that, we're going to have a whole bunch of different leagues. There'll be one overall score board for that and one overall champion. But if you're in something like that, and you were just talking about cricket, if you don't like cricket or whatever, the other thing you can do is you can punt it. So this is an example of Paul's draft. These are all the teams he drafted. There are some flex picks in here. I don't know. I can't really see them off the top of my head, but somewhere in there, you're going to have 2 of the same sports at certain points. NASCAR, he has multiple times down at the bottom there. And then one of these sports down at the bottom, he probably only picked one of and fully punted, like probably college basketball. Marquette was his only his only team he picks in the 21st round. If you don't like cricket, you don't care about it, you don't want to pick it, you don't have to. Like other people will take those picks and you can just pick it at the end, like any other draft. But that is another way to I love Paul's note. This is the way to do it. Just draft 16 straight winners. So the color coding, green is overall champions. He didn't have any runners up, which is interesting. That would be blue. Yellow is semifinalists. Orange is quarterfinalists. The top 8 score points in every sport. He had point scores with each of his first 16 picks, which is incredible. Like for the bottom picks that you saw there that weren't any colors, those guys didn't score, but you don't see any on this screenshot right now because all of his first 16 picks finished top 8. Yeah,
I don't know why, but I'm irrationally mad that he got both the XFL and USFL teams.
No, I was pissed about that too.
Because there's like a lot of parity in those ones too. It's like get the fuck
there is,
out.
yeah. You're gonna draft them early because God.
Yeah. Yes, the classic modified zero cricket strategy. That's
right.
We could employ. Yeah, that's
and Medvedev.
awesome.
He had that guy Medvedev.
Yeah, man.
Were we watching him last year?
That's right. So tennis is one I want to talk to you guys about because Pete was pretty in on Carlos Alcaraz too, right? The young Spaniard. So
I think so. I think it was because of Nick Bird in the chat was one of our tennis grinders, and he got me excited about him.
And then the year prior, Pat, you were into Medvedev, and we watched the Medvedev highlights.
Yeah.
Yes.
So where we're at right now in tennis, we're kind of in a transition. Djokovic still won the 80 points last year, but Alcaraz is now has more expected points. So we have the expected points on the site that tell you, like, basically off future odds. Djokovic is favored in 3 of the 4 tournaments, but by very slim margins over Alcaraz at Wimbledon, US Open, and next year's Australian Open. And Alcaraz is like a pretty overwhelming favorite at the French. So when you average out the odds, Alcaraz is the slight Omni Cup favorite over Djokovic, which hasn't happened since I've done. Like, it's been only Djokovic or Nadal. And then you have Medvedev had a good year, and he's now kind of the clear number 3, I think it is. And the other name that's there, and I was looking at that, and I was like, I think these are Pete and Pat's guys. They were on these guys early.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah,
the next wave.
Yeah.
Tennis scouts.
That's right.
Yeah. Similar to how we were just early on Laviska Chenault and
Just
Sky Moore.
really early.
Just way too early. What do you, for people also who are uninitiated, Gretch, what is the best way to like prep or get ready for one of these drafts? Because I think for a lot of people, it might seem daunting and overwhelming to need to know this many sports.
I mean, part of it is just constantly daunting, and I do a lot of the research during the draft, and every time I place one of these picks, I'm like, yeah, I fucked that up. I mean, it's just literally like an existential dread clicking. It's one of the fun things about Omni Fantasy. There's so many ways you can go. It is very difficult to weigh all of the, web of what am I trying to push and what am I trying to do? All the questions that we ask ourselves when we do drafts, it's hard to do when there's like 13 different sports you're considering. But in terms of trying to prepare, I mean, the expected points on the site are really helpful. You are trying to think about the sports that their playoff structures and their overall, like, whether the favorites in odds actually end up winning, whether there's that overall consistency, like year to year, how the scoring is awarded. Like for men's tennis, for example, we do an aggregation of the 4 majors. And so that is kind of helpful because if you get upset one time, you can still win the overall title. That's not really the case in a lot of the other sports where, like, if the Chiefs would have got upset, they just don't score any points. You don't get another shot at it, right? So I feel like there's a little less variance in men's tennis. It's played out that way over the years. But women's tennis was a little bit wild this year. Maybe just more parity in the skill level on that side. Golf is similar with the 4 majors, and also there's a lot of fluctuations, just the way anyone can kind of win one golf tournament by playing really well for one weekend. And so you think through the different sports like that, then all the ones that have brackets, like college football to me is a little bit harder to predict and college basketball too, because there's a lot more.
College basketball is like the ultimate variant sport.
Really is compared to like NBA, where NBA is pretty open now too. But it used to be every year, if you drafted LeBron James team, you're probably getting to the finals, right? If you draft the Golden State Warriors, you're probably getting some points out of them. So yeah, you're just trying to think through the different sports like that. I've written up strategy guides before. You were just showing some of the posts from the omnifantasy.substack.com newsletter. There's some stuff there from old posts where I tried to look at some of the strategy. And in doing that in the past, I've just tried to look at whether the top drafted teams in Omnifantasy actually go on to win. And then those are the teams that I want to take in the early rounds. And the ones that don't usually have the top drafted teams win, I want to try to take a long shot and try to hit those points late.
Well, we keep an eye out for more from Gretch. I do recommend just subscribing to that Substack. It's a free Substack, so you'll just get the kind of updates in your inbox as Gretch fires them off. There's also the sign-up sheet as well. And also recommend just getting in, even with a smaller group of people, and whipping up your own leagues with your friends. What is the minimum amount to max amount for people in a league, Gretch?
There's really no number. I've done leagues as small as like 4 people before in past years to just try out some different stuff. It gets really concentrated. Like your team, you're picking favorites in every sport throughout your draft. I think the optimal is closer to about like 8 after having done this for a lot of years. We had as many as my main league was a 16-team draft last year, but we added more people, so we split it into 2 this year. We have 20 now, so we decided to do 2 10-team leagues, and we're going to crown one overall winner from that. I think the 8 to 10 range is good. 12 plus, you're starting to get a little thin where you run out of good picks by like the middle of the draft, and it's just a different type of draft, but it is a little torturous. You're like, I don't enjoy picking any of these teams by the 16-team dream draft we used to have, like round 5. You're like, I don't want my 5th pick to be someone that I like think is terrible, but that's what it ends up being. It gets tricky when you get that big. But theoretically, you can go as big as you want. You just can't include sports that don't have enough teams in them. And so part of the thing about doing like an 8-team league, you can include the XFL, USFL, now the UFL, because they only have 8 teams. There is one rule: you have to draft at least 1 team from every sport. And so if you have 10 teams, you can't play with the UFL because there's only 8 options. You can't, not everyone can get one. So once you get bigger, you are limited a little bit in what you're able to do in terms of the leagues you're able to include. But there's still plenty, obviously. Most of the leagues have 30. Most of the professional leagues have 30-ish teams, and the college leagues all have, 100, right? And tennis and golf have so many options, all the individual sports. We have the NASCAR and F1. There's so many on the site now, different ways to play. So you could play a really large league if you wanted to.
Yeah. I love the 8 from the ones I've done with you, because I feel like I've done like 8, 10s, and 12s, and I definitely like the 8-person ones there. So that would be my recommendation if you're trying to spin up your leagues. And if you guys want to, within the Ship Chasing channel, I'd be happy to set up a thread for people too if you wanted to organize one in there and kind of.
Well, there's an Omni Fantasy channel in the Deposit Kingdom as well. Yeah. So I would recommend if any of the Ship Chasers want to get their own little side leagues going, like chat it up in there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Down in the it's just a public channel within the Deposit Kingdom. There's the Omni. All right, let's talk some playoff fantasy. Unless Gretch, are there any other admin or housekeeping items with Omni that people should know about? I'll drop the link to sign up in the show notes.
There's really one more minor thing, but also with cricket, I just sent you a Twitter thing that one of my friends sent about a cricket board. You should pull this up. This got sent to me just like a few hours ago today. All the terminology in cricket is wild. But the other thing that I forgot that we should mention is we had a Ship Chasing Cup as well last year. So we had the Omni Cup, we had the Ship Chasing Cup. I was telling you guys, I'm trying to find it, who the winner was, but the winner absolutely crushed. It was Lex Pace.
Yes, Lex Pace. Yeah.
He crushed everyone. So there was a Gretch League, a Pat League, a Pete League. We all had 14 teams. It got a little bit big and overwhelming. I don't know if we're going to run this one back this year, but shout out to Lex for crushing that. He cleared every other drafter by more than 100, by 160 points. Even in a 14-team draft, he had 4 champions and 4 runners-up. No one else in any of the 3 drafts had more than 5 combined champions plus runners-up. He had 8.
Wow.
So he had his team was sick. So shout out to him for a great team in the Ship Chasing Cup. But this is hilarious. That cricket thing.
The terminology here is out of control. Fly slips, gullies, silly points,
mid off,
mid off,
good,
deep mid off.
That's
wide
long off.
Deep mid off is what the Chiefs call their wide receiver drills.
Exactly. I wish it was deep. It's all shallow shit.
All right, so we're gonna bring Zach on in a second. Just got a monster super chat here from Colin. Hopefully, I'm saying your name right there. Got first and second in the $35 FFPC Playoff Challenge, second in the $200 FFPC Playoff Challenge. Also finished 6th in the best ball contest on there for $260,000 this year. I really appreciate the content you boys do. Just wanted to say thank you. Have a drink on me. Cheers. Holy shit, Colin. Congratulations.
Congrats.
I mean, Pete, you and I are going to enjoy the drink, but there's a real irony in the 260K winner sending a drink on him to Crane.
Hey, I mean, that is and I assume, Colin, tell me, was the team that got second, I assume it was one of the teams in the 35? Like did you have the same teams in both contests? I'm guessing.
That's probably.
I want to go pull up this,
but that is now insane. And speaking of insane, the only person that can say "hold my beer" to that might be the FFPC Playoff Challenge winner himself for $500K. We got Zach Toyo on the program. Welcome, Toyo.
Hey, thanks, Pete. What's up, Pat? What's up, Gretch?
What's up?
How are we doing?
I'm already getting like major. I went to your Twitter profile. I saw you mentioning stuff about Zen. I see a wave. You got the hair. Are you a surfer? I'm getting big time surfer vibes.
We do a little surfing down here. So
yeah,
we need to get Pat in the water down in San Diego.
Yeah.
You're in San Diego too?
Nope. I split time between Hawaii and the West Coast. So
nice.
My home base is Hawaii right here.
There you go.
I saw that you won the playoff challenge and you shouted us out, and I was checking. I was like, oh my god! So Bulky's already got an interview up with you. That was quick. That's really cool though. And realized, oh no, you also took down the best ball tournament on FFPC, turned it around, and just quickly repeated with the playoff challenge.
Yeah, it was a fruitful 2023 season. Took the best ball challenge out and rolled everything back into this beautiful playoff tournament. So
how many teams did you roll into the playoff tournament?
So best ball, I tried to max the FFPC out, which is obviously a different animal for, let's say, Underdog. So I had 115 best ball FFPC teams, advanced 25. Then I ended up with 5, and the last man standing was the best ball champion. And I ended up doing 90, 90. FFPC playoff challenge entries.
Dude,
so.
That is what, like, max entering a best ball contest is, I mean, yes, it requires more time than getting a bunch of entries into the playoff challenge, but just from our own personal experience, from an organizational level, like we had 75 and we always all want to kill each other by the end of it.
And we have like 5-6 people working on it.
How did you get 90 entries in? Like,
I wanted to max the FFPC, but I just ran out of time. Obviously,
you will literally like run out of time entering it on the site. Like it's not streamlined.
How did you organize all that? I mean, so we have like spreadsheets galore and 5 people cross-checking. I can't imagine solo entering 90 lineups and not feeling like there's like a lot of overlap. And so, like, Pete, to your point, when you're maxing best ball, you're drafting these on like different days. You can check your portfolio throughout it. All of this locks at once, and you're just tweaking 90 different lineups. Like, that's a whole different animal. It's a very different thing.
Yeah, especially this year, I thought was unique because some of the information was coming in so late. You had the Eagles holding the AJ Brown designation tight to the vest, and then the Mark Andrews news came out late. And then the biggest wrinkle to me was the weather in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And then the Pittsburgh game. So yeah, I didn't start this exercise really till Friday. And in years past, I like to kind of meditate and then do the spreadsheets and really settle in. I mean, I think that industry adores this contest just because it's such a dynamic game theory puzzle piece.
It's like the ultimate game theory contest.
Yeah, it is. So it was a final exam cram from Friday to Saturday. Actually, Dave Gerzek from the FFPC gave me a call. I missed his call. I had 30 lineups that were incomplete, 45 minutes to lock. So I was
how many?
It from my 30, 45
No,
minutes.
how many minutes did you have left?
I had 45 minutes left to input 30.
So you're just mashing buttons at that point?
No, it was it. I had it all in my Excel spreadsheets, and I was essentially inputting it. So it was down to.
And for people who don't know, inputting it is not like
it takes about a minute per team. Like it's or maybe a little more.
I had 2 minutes to spare.
Wow!
Holy cow!
Wow!
And then do you know which lineup?
The winner.
Yeah. So this was my 71st.
Oh my God! You put it into the last 45-minute gram.
Yep. It was one of the last ones. And I got to give props to the legendary upside.
When did it lock in Hawaii? What time is it?
The first game on Saturday was 11:30 a.m. Yeah.
Okay.
So when you were building these out in your spreadsheet, what angle were you taking? Were you like locking your quarterbacks and like filling out? Were you like putting like a set exposure target? You referenced Pat's ownership ranks. Like what was kind of your
thanks for stepping
process?
All over that,
Yeah, I thought the best play in the tournament was Lamar. So I sort of settled that I was going to do 40% builds from Lamar at the top. And I think I started pushing some of that percentage towards Josh once the Buffalo game got moved till Monday. But I took my stands, started with Lamar. I think I had 25% Josh and just sort of worked from there. The key to me of this contest, when I participated last year, I finished top 20 and I had DK Metcalf, and that skill position piece that gets eliminated in the first week, you need to get that right. And you had all these Rams pieces, which I couldn't figure out, the Browns pieces. So I just went shopping for exposure.
Mixing and matching, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And who did you end up overweight on any of the winners, or did your portfolio on the whole do well, or did you just have the one perfect lineup?
I finished my second best lineup, finished 40, but it was an imperfect process. I wish I had more time, but I mean, this is the one that stuck.
Yeah. I should pull this up.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the team now. One of the things you did, well, there's a couple things you did incredibly well, but you full faded Miami. You talked about the weather thing. I assume across your portfolio, you did a lot of picking a winner in case you're Miami, which is something that we definitely talked about on the show. You also played both sides of Green Bay, Dallas, which ended up being huge because you have Aaron Jones in this lineup. You played both sides of Philly, Tampa, which people didn't necessarily want to do, which made Devonta Smith a really nice play in a loss that like you were talking about. And then you also had Evans advancing. You have Puka Nacua in a loss here, which was a really key. And Njoku, you also mentioned. That one was wild because he loses, but you have Houston's defense on this team. But Houston's defense winds up being optimal for them in 2 games because they scored 3 touchdowns in 2 games. Mm-hmm. So really, you're probably playing that more like a Browns win, but it ends up working. And then also you played Tucker. You faded the Ravens, and he was optimal in 2 games as well when Allen beat Lamar, and there was no other Ravens that were huge. So that, I mean, it was the kicker and defense thing was really fascinating this year, but it's cool how you played the right games both ways there. Green Bay and Dallas and Tampa and Philly are the 2 that really stand out.
Yeah, actually, out of the 90, it was a frightening fade of Miami, specifically with Tyreek. But I took a hard stand on a hard fade on Miami, and that really sort of worked out in my favor. I had success in the main event this year. I advanced 7 teams to the playoffs, and I think around week 12, I was picking up Houston defense. Or it might have been week 13. Stingley was coming on, Anderson was coming on, and then you had that D'Amico blitz package. It sort of bled into this tournament where I sort of settled on Houston as a defense. So I had a bunch of Houston Tucker combinations, and if you notice at the top, that was key, the Houston Tucker combination.
When you were doing that, were you thinking like maybe Browns to the AFC Championship? Because the whole thought was Houston Cleveland winner probably goes to the Ravens, and it did. And usually you want your kicker and your D to play one game. So when I saw lineups like this, my thought was, well, they were probably playing Njoku to beat Houston and then to also beat Baltimore, and you have a Browns AFC Championship run. And instead you wind up with a Houston Baltimore matchup where actually both the specialists end up being optimal.
Yep, that was the strategy. Just a soft fade on Houston and get that Njoku passed, and hopefully they beat Baltimore. And just it worked out with Tucker where he stayed even with the field, and it kind of gave you a little extension on your timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny you said you thought the best play of the tournament was Lamar Jackson, and then it's a Justin Tucker team that takes it down for you.
Yeah.
Yep. And that was the other reason I sort of in the 11th hour started getting onto Tucker, and it was somewhat of a hedge. I had like 35 Lamar teams. So
yeah, it's such a funny tournament because like it is so much game theory and kind of playing it to pick the bracket and everything. But it's also like, it's wild that like this team didn't have Jake Ferguson, like you didn't actually, and we were sweating. We were like, man, look, like at this point, let's just look at our Ferguson teams. And we didn't have the right kind of combos with the Ferguson teams. It was very frustrating, but it's wild to see that's like, no, there's actually so many things that you have to get right in this tournament over the course of all the rounds that you didn't even need Ferguson.
Yeah, I was really tilted because I had a bunch of Aaron Jones Ferguson lineups, sort of guessing if Dallas lost, it'd be Ferguson in rubbish time, and it would be Aaron Jones as the key component. And I was just tilted because I just had the combinations wrong, and I almost had that Lamar, Ferguson, Aaron Jones, which would have kind of had me covered with this team if Baltimore had beat KC. But I mean, this tournament means a lot. It's I've been participating in it. I think it's special. And I think maybe 2 years from now, if this were to run, you would need the optimal Dallas Ferguson lineup with all the Sims getting incorporated. So yeah, I was actually surprised that a Ferguson lineup did not take this down.
I know I was too, just because he scored so many points. But the CD ownership, I think, did come in, around 90% or something. I forget off the top of my head.
Ferguson came in at 1%, which was shocking.
There you go.
Yeah, we were kind of bummed that we didn't wind up with a little more of him because I think we had 2 or 3 lineups, and then I looked at the percentages, and we were double the field with 2 lineups of him, or whatever we had. I mean, maybe. We ended up with a Ferguson Nakua team that had Jaden Reed instead of Aaron Jones, but it was a Josh Allen. It had Baltimore's DST, but it didn't play Baltimore heavy. It was a pretty strong roster, but it had Jaden Reed, and Leone was tilting that one the whole time.
You guys finished relatively well in this contest, right?
We had a couple top 20s.
Yeah, we had this team in 16th, team in 19th. We haven't run the full accounting on it. I think we're pretty close to breaking even on our 75 entries, which, the friends you made along the way, I guess, but, trying to climb up there, at least into the top 5, like you and Colin. I did want to take a peek at Colin's team here in the chat. Very similar team. I hate how this fades away. Difference is obviously Chase McLaughlin and Zay Flowers and Amari Cooper. So I believe those were the kind of the three main differences there.
Yeah, that looks right.
That's it. I was looking at his team. I thought my biggest risk headed into the KC game was obviously it was essentially a $500,000 payout for a 2-leg parlay, and the first one was the KC money line. And I thought the Lamar teams were going to start steaming up, but this Zay team started bubbling up, and that a touchdown where the ball gets knocked out was really
man.
That's the other thing Leone tilted on our teams. Both of our top 20 teams have Zay and would have, I think, both been top 10. If
we were Team Cullen on that one, Toyo.
We wanted Zay to score that TD.
Yeah, this one, our team that finished 16th was a Nico, Zay, and then the team
that's when we
19th.
were no longer live, was when Zay didn't catch that TD. And I don't know if we were actually live at that point either, but I think we had like some slim, maybe we were live to finish like third is what it was.
Yeah.
But we needed Zay to go on to have a big Super Bowl as well. And yeah, him not scoring that touchdown was brutal for us too.
Yep. That's incredible, man. So what else was your process? You said you had Pat's ownership projection. Someone in the chat said you were just doing it based on vibes. Is this true? What kind of vibes based? A little meditation, that's all it takes? Pat's ranks, meditation, you're good to go.
A little meditation. It was an all-nighter, so I mean it was a flawed process, but I'm just glad this one stuck. The Tucker, the legendary upside discourse and with ship chasing sort of brought me towards this Tucker build, and with the fact that I had 35 Lamar teams, I was pretty shocked. I think Pat had the projected at 12% for Tucker, maybe 13, and he ended up being at 5%. And when I saw that, I mean, I was stoked. I had
the defense steamed up is what it was. I thought the defense was going to be like the sneaky leverage play on Tucker and end up being the other way around.
Yeah.
Pat Kornacki, you needed to take from.
That was an all-time.
That was a miss for Pat Kornacki for sure.
So it sounds like you play a ton of volume on FFPC across a ton of contests, main event, playoff contests. Obviously, how long have you been playing on the platform?
I think I've been playing about 8 years on the FFPC. I've had the top 5 finish in main event. This was my first big stab at the best ball tournament. I think it's probably relatively rare for someone to fire off over 100 in this specific tournament. But had fun on Underdog too. I was actually fortunate enough to make the finals in BBM 4. So that was a nice sweat.
What a year, man.
Yeah, fruitful.
Did you have a sweat at all in BBM, or did it peter out?
Yeah, I just had the CD Amon Ra. I came to the party with everyone's favorite correlation. I had the Laporta Terry week 15 piece, had Amari 16, and I think finished 300th, but it was a good time.
Well, when you have the other sweat, what was your FFPC best ball team like?
So the FFPC had the CD piece, but it had Devontae. So in a full point PPR, Devontae had 37 points as opposed to Amon Ra at 22.
Wow.
Had Naked Lamar, had a DJ Moore piece, and I had the jump on the field with the Brees and Njoku correlation.
Nice.
That's nuts.
That's
and
sick.
So what was your, like, if you're drafting that many, best ball teams, what kind of process did you have? Were you approaching it from a portfolio standpoint? Were you just trying to draft the best possible team in every room? Were you trying to draft them across the drafting spectrum as far as like at what time of the year you were entering these?
Yeah, I thought I was the draft cycle just seemed perfect to me. I took player stands. I had great closing line ADP value throughout my portfolios. That's something I always focus on. The player stands worked out for me. The fades worked out. And so, yeah, I kind of hit around 22% advance rate. And I was slightly disappointed that I only had one bullet. My goal was sort of 2 to 3. But this team just sort of worked out.
Yeah, clearly.
What was the final size on FFPC this year?
Yeah, so best ball is 10,600. Does that sound right?
Total entries?
Yeah.
Oh, total.
For the 125, right? That price point?
125, 200K purse. FFPC is 10,600. Top 2 advanced to week 15, and it's top 2 to 16, and top 3 to week 17.
Because when you said you were disappointed, again, did you say 110 entries?
Yeah, 115. So I went 20% on the advance rate, had 25 teams advanced, and I had 5 teams in week 16. And I was hoping that I had 2 or 3 advanced to the week 17.
Because you almost had at that kind of volume, 125 a pop at 115. I don't remember the prize structure, but you almost have to get at least one team to the finals to not be really underwater, right?
You do. I was sweating this. I mean, there's a lot of invested time and 115 drafts on FFPC. So very fortunate this one worked out.
And it's a 72 team final. So, I mean, you have work to do in the final. That's a nice result to take.
That's
down.
really
How many
blown up.
FFPC best ball teams did you guys do? Or did you?
Just a couple.
I didn't really fire at it because I was honestly, like, with as much drafting as I was doing on Underdog and DraftKings, I was like trying to figure out like the timing of it. I didn't want to do slow drafts, so trying to get fast drafts to fill. I kind of gave up on trying to get in there. I had one fill on me while I was at the dog park and auto drafted, and that kind of soured me a little bit.
What's your background, Zach? Are you a professional fantasy football drafter? You mentioned getting in some surfing, splitting your time. What's your day-to-day like?
Yeah, I was doing some day trading. I've sort of shifted my focus to the sports wagering markets and fantasy, and hopefully these wins can give me a little powder to continue.
Nice.
That's awesome. Sacrilegious wants to know, did you do a ton of slow drafts? Yeah. What was the ratio on slow to fast?
Yeah. I mean, in order to fire off 115 in the FFPC, you needed to do some slows. I prefer the live draft. I think it was 70-30, 70 live, 30 slow.
Gotcha.
It's amazing to do the type of volume where you can literally mean 70 teams in 30.
Yeah, I was like, that's up to 100. Oh, those are.
Because you mean percent, or actually it doesn't matter?
Yeah. Did you find, like, to Pat's point, did you find drafting across multiple platforms to be like an edge and kind of sharpen, across various markets, or was it hard to reorient yourself to the pretty massive scoring differences?
I thought it was an edge, sort of going back and forth from Underdog to FFPC, sort of comparing the different markets. For example, Underdog had Raheem Mostert over Jeff Wilson, and an FFPC best ball, it was the other way around. And I sort of settled on Raheem, just respecting the Underdog market and the lean on that. And even now, I haven't really dived into the big board in Underdog. I've fired off a couple never too early drafts, and just I do think there is an edge of firing off drafts in different platforms and diagnosing the different markets.
For sure.
I
That's
felt
super
that
sharp.
even across like game types. I mean, even this year doing weekly DFS contests, like seeing what the battle royale ADPs were, and like there would be the week where like it was Kenneth Walker against the Cardinals, and he just like steamed up the battle royale ADP, and it was like you knew that steam was going to carry over to DraftKings, even though it's different pricing, different structure, but like those kind of having that extra data point, especially at large volume when there's so much data baked into those ADPs, I think it's incredibly valuable.
Absolutely.
Even just from a portfolio management thing of like, hearing that you're getting Mostert behind Wilson, that stung because I didn't take that much Mostert on Underdog, partly because I was like, I can always just get Wilson. But if you're over on the other side and it's flipped, you kind of naturally end up on the cheapest guy. If your whole thing is I'll just take the cheapest guy on FFPC, the cheapest guy is the one who wins it.
Right. For sure. Who ended up being like some of your big stands in season long across either Underdog or FFPC?
So yeah, I mentioned Raheem.
Yeah,
was a big play. I had a lot of Tank Dell. I did take a big stand on CD. I mean, at points I was taking him above Diggs.
Oh, nice.
So I had him on my board at around 8th. He was kind of going on the turn. Took a big stand on him, which worked out.
Yeah, it's cool. 400-point PPR season. It's pretty good thing to have.
You said on your board, do you set your own ranks? Are you tweaking other ranks or just tweaking ADP? How do you go about that?
I am tweaking my ranks off of legends like Pat, Gretch, you, and
no, you don't have to butter me up. I don't have any ranks to tweak.
I'm an ADP hound at the end of the day. Looking for some margins on that and sort of going through the draft cycle and trying to find some edges in that.
So it does sound like you approach all of this. It's, if you do day trading, that it is like a very market-based game for you. And if you're putting that kind of volume in, it almost has to be.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Like I said, this was my first big stab specifically at the FFPC. So I kind of took that approach.
Do you mind sharing any kind of like what was a big stand for you? Like if Mostert, like what kind of percent of the FFPC teams would be like? I
gotta pull up my exposures. I haven't checked in a moment.
Okay. Because there's some. It's sort of a risk tolerance thing. I think where, I tend to get a little bit more consistently carried away than like Pete does. For example, I'll get up to 30% on a couple guys usually.
Yeah, what was funny is one of my highly exposed tight ends was actually Tucker Kraft. I had him at like
really
20%.
That's a big stand because he was going on. Well, I guess in FFPC,
he's going undrafted,
even on FFPC.
Yes.
Wow.
I think I had 20% on 115 FFPC teams.
Was that like a film guy take? Like you didn't buy Luke Musgrave?
It was. I just kind of went down this wormhole and I was like, Tucker Kraft is going to beat out Musgrave. He's Dallas Goedert 2.0. I've read this.
You might be right about ultimately.
I read the Brugler's Beast Guide, and it was just he was a slalom ski master at 12 years old or something, and I just took a weird stand on Tucker Kraft. I can't pull up my exposures. Everything's sort of.
Oh.
It's all good.
It's all locked.
So I love that though, because you were talking about, following ADP to a degree and some of those things, but also your stand on Lamb. I think the further along, just like stepping way back, the further along I get in this and do this year after year after year, the best years I have is when I have respect for the market, but also have some stands and those stands hit, right? I think you still have to have your conviction. You got to have your guys. You can't just be completely market based And so it's funny. You said it was like a weird stand you took on this slalom skier guy that you learned, but that same mentality is what landed you on a high exposure to CeeDee Lamb, being willing to say he's better than Diggs and he's my 8th overall player, and he outscores every receiver but 2 by at least 100 points. I mean, so you when you hit that stand, it elevates the whole portfolio. It's huge. I think it's interesting. I mean, I think it's a feature, not a bug, even though Tucker Kraft sucked, right? Like,
yeah. So Laporta was a key to my season. I had 20% Laporta.
That'll do it.
Him sprinkled into a lot of main event teams. Took a stand on Rasheed. I had 20% Rasheed Rice. JSN. Oof. 25%.
Oh, no.
The skeleton.
I feel you there.
If the hits outweigh the misses, though, you're gonna be good.
How devastating is it that like JSN's in the Eno Benjamin range? Remember Eno Benjamin advance rate player where he did nothing a couple years ago, but was on all the winning teams because the sharp drafters liked him.
Hey, he had that touchdown in week 16. Okay, you can't.
Yeah. That's all. Yeah, it seems like you have a nice blend, like Gretch was saying, of respecting the market, but also not being afraid to have your takes. And it's like if you're reading, deep scouting reports on this, it sounds like you enjoy some of that, I know ball aspect as well.
I mean, that's how I got into fantasy. I just was infatuated with the draft since high school and genuinely enjoy following it. NFL draft is somewhat of my Super Bowl. I'll watch the combine. I'll do all 3 days of the draft. So sort of develops like an intimate knowledge of players in the pool. And I think it gives you the ability to take these player stands if you're genuinely excited about the business side and the NFL draft.
Love it.
What would be your advice to people who are sitting here watching and are like, this guy just lives the dream, splits his time between Hawaii and the West Coast, ships best ball tournaments, meditates during the day? What do they have to do to be getting interviewed here on
Enters this lineup 2 minutes before the lock?
Yeah.
Man, I think they got a legendary upside's been a valuable resource. I have to give you props, Pat, for shipping BBM and then turning this around into such a great resource. But yeah, I would advise everyone to sort of dive as deep as you can into Pat's leg up, and RotoViz has been a great resource for me also. And then Pete, ship chasing, you're the man.
Well, we appreciate that. Yeah, and it sounds like, as someone who deals with markets too, you understand variance. I mean, I assume this is your best fantasy year by a big margin.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is very gratifying that one finally hit. After winning best ball, I sort of tried to capture that momentum, and I rolled 10% over into the playoff best ball challenge. And I'm just grateful it worked out. Like I said, this contest means a lot. I think everyone in the industry loves the playoff challenges. And it was a great year. I can't wait for 2024.
Yeah, man. You talk about momentum. You got a lot heading into this offseason. How many teams? I mean, you got the bankroll ready to go. What kind of volume do you think you're going to get down this summer?
What's the speculation on Underdog? What's the prize? Is it 3.5 or 5 for BBM 5?
I think they're going to go for 5.
I'll take the under on that.
You take the under? Okay.
I think we're going to see a ton of even different offerings this year, as opposed to just like making the flagship as big as possible. I also think we're going to see a ton more eliminator tweaks to like weekly winners. I think there's going to be like a ton of different places to park your money depending on
that seems like the smart way to do it, and they always make smart decisions. So that when you're saying that we don't want it to be 5, right? Like we want it to be flatter payout structures, all that. So that's what we talk about. Right. I mean, I think what you just said, Pete, sounds like the way to manage it, and that's awesome.
also to make it a little bit easier to make the final would be nice. And you can't. That's the way to get it to be 5. One way is to make it really hard to make the final.
Right.
And you think, for most people, like even people who degen and who get a ton of entries down it, there's normally the mantra of like, let me just get one finals team. Like, let me just have that one sweat. And so the more kind of possibilities in tournaments there are to realize that, like, as much as we joke about the chasing crane, like, it's like, does it really matter if it's 2 million or 3 million or 1.5? Like at that point, like, it's just like, it doesn't really change it. And I know Underdog now, they are not concerned about that number from a marketing standpoint, which used to be the reason for, we have to be the biggest. I know that is no longer a consideration.
All right. That's nice to hear.
I'll probably be maxing BBM 5. So maybe
for
we can cross some paths, Pat, and San Diego. I'll be multi-tabling over some coffee, but
San Diego's turning into quite the little best ball hub. We got TJ's down there.
Yeah.
Is there someone else I'm forgetting? Just Toyo and Crane holding it down.
Christian, who was in Vegas with us, is out here.
Okay. There you go.
Have you done any of the big board drafts yet, Pat? Have you been?
Yeah.
Where's?
I think I've got like 25 in. I'm trying to test the rankings and make sure I'm like because it's just actually drafting is just such a easy way to dial stuff in. Like I can get kind of the blocks of where everything should go, and then it's like, why is this guy at the top? I don't want him here.
But Pat, admit you got bullied into drafting because people wanted rankings, and so that you had to get the rankings out, and then to get the rankings out, you had to do drafting to help inform and shape those rankings.
I got bullied by Underdog. Underdog did this. They released the tournament earlier than last year, and then I had to dive into my rookie research a few weeks early. I actually like now, being where I am on the rookies. Like I feel ahead of schedule, and that's a nice feeling. But yeah, I had a week or so that I thought was going to be chill, and it wasn't chill at all.
I'll give you another plug, Pat. I consumed my first bit of like rookie prospect content, and it was your pod with Connor Rogers. And that was really good. It was like both informative, but just like high level. Like I felt I wasn't like drowning in stats, and I'm like, I don't even remember which guy you're talking about, kind of thing. So if you're like me and would like a quick little primer, I enjoyed that. But Gretch and I holding out strong.
That's right.
No drafts yet.
I refuse to start the bias train. I don't want to get any. I don't want any stances on anything right now. I'm putting it off as long as I can.
Davis was already on the Swolecast on Wednesday trying to tell me like, oh, I know who's going to be your guys' Sky Moore over at Chip. I was like, stop, get this out of here right now.
Get out of here. I don't want to hear that.
He's already tried to
Gretch,
will
you
it
think
into existence.
the early involvement might confuse you when the real games begin? Is that your stance? Or because I'm looking at this as an exciting warm-up.
I mean, I wouldn't mind doing some drafting. I wasn't like a really firm stance. I would say that, I've done this for 8 years. The years that I've been really engaged in the off season, I've found it harder to come off some of my stances because you have to argue them when you're making content, when you're creating, pieces of content, you're talking about it on pods, you're writing stuff, you're making big analytical arguments supporting this player or that player. You tend to dig your heels in a little bit. It makes it a lot harder over the 6 months of, from February to August to then get off that in August. I've enjoyed the years where I've put it off as much as possible and left myself what I've told myself is analytically flexible so that when I get later into the year, I'm able to come off some of these things. I don't feel like I'm like putting myself on a certain path or biasing because I think that's the way to play. It's something that Pat does really, really well. I don't do it as well. I get like sort of obsessive on guys, but Pat throughout the year will be on one guy and then be off him for a stretch. And he's able to like play it like a stock market thing. You mentioned you've done that type of stuff with your background. It might be something that you are, it's easier for you to navigate. It's tougher for me to navigate. When I start to do I'm a very much an analyst. And when I start to do my analysis really deep, I start to formulate opinions that I have a hard time coming off of. So I want more information before I get that deep into it.
I'm just chasing ADP, I think, in these early contests, which is a good time.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the combine's a market moving event. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, Pat's boy Troy Franklin, like if he's weighing in at 187 as opposed to 197, and you accumulated some Troy, you're like, ooh.
Toyo, I think we're
Oh,
rooting for 187. At this point, I'm worried he's going to be like 177.
That's 6'3".
Yeah, dude. Dane Brugler has him listed sub 180 in his ranks. I was like, oh no.
You guys are so sick. Like your tagline for drafting big board teams right now is so you have a weigh-in sweat at the combine. Like
Dude, I did
Turned
a
on
pod with,
noties for the weigh-in.
I did a pod with Davis today, and he was touting this dude Sion Vaki out of Utah, and he's like a deep running back sleeper. And we're like, dude, I haven't heard of this guy. He's like, well, he's converting from safety. It's unclear if he's going to enter the draft as a safety or as a running back. But like, if it's as a running back, wheels up.
Well, you know who has no problem adjusting their priors on the fly? One Mr. Davis fucking Madden. That's not a concern. He will discard this guy on the trash heap in a week.
You imagine drafting a dude and then he's a safety?
Oh,
Davis is looking for this year's Puka Nacua, and he went straight to the Utah schools, and he was like, "All right, I got this safety from Utah. That's this year's. He might be a running back. We'll take him."
That is the other, and I'm not discrediting the value in diving in now, but it's crazy to think of, like, you know, Toyo mentions the combine being like a market moving event, and obviously the draft and even training camp, and think like how long it took to even get Tank Dell firmly on the fantasy drafting radar. And then even Puka, obviously, even later than that. It's like these uber smashes, and they weren't even coming into focus like in May, you know, after multiple market moving events.
Yeah. And Puka's a great example of where by the time he came on, I had decided that he wasn't good. I didn't do a lot of research on him. I wrote about him extensively after stealing signals, or after week one and stealing signals, and had him as the top waiver pickup and was really high on him because I went back and looked at the stuff that I like to look at and saw how good he was at targets per route run. It really was just a routes run issue, and that the routes were there for him immediately with the Rams. It's like, this is going to stick. His huge first week was going to stick. It's pretty clear. But I've written a lot about him even in my recap stuff this offseason. He's one that for me is a good example of where I feel like I was too confident that he couldn't play before, you know, when he came onto the scene late, as opposed to being flexible enough to like go back and look at it while we were still drafting. Because I didn't really want to even draft him while we were still drafting. I didn't go back and look at it until after week one. Well, then it's a little late, you know? So
yeah,
those are examples.
Too. I was so annoyed with myself. I was like, team rookie wide receiver, team draft Rams wide receivers, got really into Kyron, was drafting Stafford in 2-2, and then it's like, Puka? Nah. Like, what? You idiot.
I took a little stand on the Cincinnati wide receiver in these early drafts, Andre Yosivas, as maybe the next Puka, but maybe not at that extreme level.
Sean loved him last year out of Princeton. I remember talking to him a lot about Yosivas.
I just saw it looks like T. Higgins is going to get tagged, though.
Yeah.
So.
What's Boyd's contract?
He's a free agent.
Because he could slide into that Boyd role.
What's Boyd's value?
right.
Yeah. That's an interesting.
Pat, does your big board rankings at all reflect potential landing spots, specifically in the top 10?
Well,
so basically, last year I was in these early drafts. I drafted a lot of Zay, thinking that the Chargers were going to draft them. I was like, Zay is going to be drafted by the Chargers, which was sort of a senseless exercise. But
they wanted him. That was the whole thing about there being a disconnect I heard between the GM and the coaching. I forget, maybe it was Brett Coleman when I was hanging out with him this weekend. He was telling me that the coaches wanted Zay. Anyway, sorry.
No, I just think it might be a viable strategy in these early tournaments to sort of project landing spots specifically in the top 10. So I'm looking at your rankings. I'm just wondering if there's any landing spot projections
Not really. I would, if Harrison goes to the Cardinals, I think I'll even have him a little higher. If he goes to the Patriots, though, I think he's got to come down a little bit. So I'm not projecting that. I guess he's probably more Cardinals baked in there than not.
Right.
And then I think the other Patriots part of that is, do they end up with Jaden Daniels or Drake May? And I think there's a little bit of risk to the May pick. If he goes to the Patriots, it's just such a bummer
Right.
that weapons they can't protect him very well. But he's so cheap, and I think he's such a value that I'm kind of drafting through it, and the rank reflects that, but not really. I mean, I think the Neighbors is pretty well set up in the top 10. He could go to the Cardinals if Harrison were to go to the Patriots. He could go to the Chargers. He could go to the Giants. I think all those are pretty decent spots. And I'm not super worried about a Dunze, because a Dunze could end up with the Bears or something, and that's pretty sweet if they've just got Caleb Williams. So I would say that they aren't really baked in, but partly because I'm not that concerned in terms of the downside, and I'm above market on all those guys by at least a little bit.
Go ahead.
I'm concerned on the downside when I'm drafting these teams. I think the draft starts at 5. My lean, Caleb goes 1. I'm taking Drake with Terry and Jahan.
I like that. That's how I try to do it too.
That the Commanders are taking Drake, although that seems like there's a lot of steam coming Jaden. Then the 3 spot is a sacrificial lamb spot. I just think Patriots take Jaden.
Yeah.
4 is Marvin Harrison Jr. If the Cardinals don't take him, someone else is going to come up. Then the real NFL draft begins at 5. My lean is Harbaugh takes the tackle from Notre Dame or Bowers. And that's when the other sacrificial lamb spot comes in at 6, which is why I haven't been taking much Neighbors, on the basis that I think Neighbors is just going to separate from Odunze. And I just think the Giants are going to take him at 6. So
hearing you guys say Neighbors, for the first time I'm realizing that it's the person that lives next to you, because I've always seen it written. I think I haven't listened to it. It sounds just like Neighbors. I was like, wait, Neighbors, Neigh? Oh, that's who you're talking about.
Is it Neighbors or?
Yeah, it's Neighbors.
Yeah.
No, it's Neighbors.
It sounds exactly like that.
Someone's getting in the lab on
we got some
Mr.
team name
Rogers
things.
parody right now.
Yeah, we got some stuff to work on here.
My Neighbors.
I think the Giants could cut Waller, and so I just think the targets available in New York could be huge. And I just think Neighbors so good that I hear what you're saying, but he's the type of prospect who we would be so excited about if Harrison wasn't in this class.
I think it's sharp though, Zach. In something, even when I was doing the big board stuff last year, I wasn't doing enough of, which is taking a stand on the stack, because unless it's the only downside scenario would be if it was a 50-50 spot where 50% of the market was stacking him one way and then you were wrong stacking him the other. But that's not the case. Most people aren't stacking. And so even if you're wrong, you just have him unstacked 95% of the field does.
Everyone
most
else,
likely.
yeah.
Right. As well, you're free.
And you have a little bit of a stack on their passing game if you have both, McLaurin and Dotson. You still have a little bit of the receiver thing going on, or however you're playing that. I wonder about May. I know that they're not going to put all the weight on. I'm a little concerned about Washington's new ownership. And then you have basically the point I'm trying to make is you have Howell from UNC, you have May from UNC. It's right up the road from Washington. There's a lot of people that live in DC that are that went to UNC and stuff. It's right below Virginia geographically. North Carolina is. So anyway, I wonder a little bit if it's a little push to be we can't take another UNC quarterback, and that's going to actually sway them. It shouldn't. I'm vaguely worried about that.
Yeah. The downside, right? Even let's say you take McLaurin, Dotson, maybe even you go like Brian Robinson, you're really building out the stack. You grab Drake May, and then they take Jaden Daniels. Like, I mean, Jaden Daniels is still going to throw the ball like a fair amount, I think. Like he's got, I like May a lot better as a passer, but I don't know that you're devastated that you have the Washington guys. Like I think they can probably still get there. So it's a build I think worth, like the downside isn't that bad even if it doesn't come together. So I've been doing that too, trying to do the Washington stack.
The more I hear people talk about this draft class, I'm starting to get the vibes it has the potential to be like one of the best like fantasy rookie drafting experiences yet. Just if you think about it this way, ton of wide receiver talent that we're going to be able to draft. Ton of viable quarterbacks that you're going to be able to take in drafts where sometimes you're just like, do I really want to take these guys? And then you're going to have so much ambiguity at running back, right? Where you're just going to have this flood of guys who are probably going to be like past 100, picks or double digit plus round picks, because we're not going to get a ton of studs with like really early.
It's last year's class without Robinson and Gibbs.
Right. And so that not having the certainty there is probably going to just create a shit ton of like viable options, like rounds 10 through 16.
Totally. Yeah. There's a bunch of
that's like a great recipe for fun fantasy drafting.
It is. Yeah. It does seem really fun. Pat, where have you fallen on a Dunze early in your research?
I have like the most boring take ever. Like I'm like, he
looks good. I thought you were going to hate him.
No, I don't hate him. I was kind of like disappointed I didn't hate him because you were like, Pat, you're gonna hate him, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna.
Let me make my own take.
And then I came in. I was like, he's a traditional outside wide receiver. He's generally seen as like very scheme proof. He's gonna kind of fit into whatever. He was productive. He broke out as a 19-year-old. He was productive throughout his career. He was efficient as an underclassman in yards per route run. He did not have a lot of contested deep targets, which I generally like as like a sign of being able to separate deep. But he has a really good contested catch rate. So it's like you can win jump balls, but you can also separate. That's good. I'd like to see him test well. Like if he doesn't test well, that would be like a minor concern. But generally, I'm like, yeah, cool. Like he seems good.
He checks a lot of boxes, right?
He checks a lot of boxes.
He's like an all-around like solid receiver. I always felt like totally film take, because I haven't dug into the numbers really at all and then like compare him to other prospects and stuff, but I always felt like he was reliable. He did everything you wanted out of a receiver, those types of things. But I'm biased as hell, so I'm interested to hear you talk about him that way, where it feels like he does everything. Like you said, he can separate deep, but also win contested catches. That's the kind of thing that like when you watched him every week, you're like, yeah, you could go to him and he would win, or he would out physical somebody at the catch point if he didn't win. Like he could do either.
And that's my stats-based take. Like, so it's kind of, it's always fun when it marries with, the film evaluations, and then you can feel more confident. But the other thing is the framing of it, right? Is that like in best ball drafts, it's Harrison 1. He's going in like the second round. Neighbors is around pick 36. Dunze is around like pick 55. And then Brian Thomas is like in the mid 70s or something. Or late 70s. So every one of those guys are in their own tier. You have to go past pick 100 to get to the next group of wide receivers. And if that feels right to me, like if Odunze was challenging Neighbors, I'd be like, this is nuts. We're looking at like this really high end, early declare prospect. I believe he led the SEC in receiving yards 2 years in a row as an underclassman. Like, come on. Why are we talking about Odunze next to this guy? But we're not. You're getting like, a 20 pick discount before you have to even think about Odunze. So it seems like efficiently priced to me.
And he might get a much better quarterback, right? If he's going later.
Potentially, yeah. So I want to be
taking more Odunze than I like Neighbors more, but I'm taking more Odunze just because I'm scared that Neighbors is landing with the Giants. And let's just say Odunze, let's say Chicago goes Caleb, and then at 9 takes Odunze. Doesn't Odunze come up around and Neighbors come down around, and aren't they right next to each other?
Yeah.
So,
And then I'm just hammering neighbors for the rest of the draft season.
Well, isn't that kind of not to put this on Ben's guy, but isn't that kind of like the Addison Quentin Johnston dynamic last year, where then like the Quentin Johnston moved up because
Don't you put that evil on him, Ricky Bobby?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
No, but I think the Quentin
I
Johnston,
can't wait to make it a Doomsday clip. That's what we're gonna have in a Doomsday
right.
clip.
I'm excited.
Don't put that.
Yeah, don't put that on him.
Oh,
Yeah, come on.
No, there's not gonna be the Doomsday clip. Come on.
I need an Ave Maria clip. Prior to that
Yeah.
Kansas City.
That's how we got to close. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Justin
That
Tucker. That's the
Kansas
one
City
clip that
game.
came through. Justin
Right.
Tucker is such the goat kicker that even a ship chasing clip couldn't ruin him.
Yeah.
I'm sure all the ship chasers know, but does the general public know that's actually Justin Tucker singing opera?
It's such a beautiful part
I
of it.
think they do.
Do they?
We've yeah, I don't know. We've commented on it at times. It's so
Yeah.
Because I played that YouTube clip before the Kansas City game for the sweat.
awesome.
Did you really?
I did
I love
so
it.
with
good.
some sage.
Look at you, man.
Well, hey man,
See,
you
I
know,
think-
you said it was a flawed process, but that worked out pretty well.
Guys, I think what we need to do, because Zach's saying, listens to the show, reads the stuff, looks at the ownership projections, but then he's doing all of this stuff, the meditation, the sage. I think we need to meet him
Yeah,
halfway, and that's
Totally.
what's going to really ignite our process and take it to the next level.
You boys better call me if you ever come to the islands. We'll put you in an ice bath sauna, open those chakras up.
all right.
Let's go, dude. Which island did you say you're at?
I'm on the North Shore of Oahu.
Okay. Very nice.
Pete's already scheduled his trip. That's opening the chakras up. You had it with the chakras.
Oh yeah,
You had him
me
at sauna
chakras for sure. It'd be like, sorry, honey, I need to go do this fantasy football spiritual journey where I need to. Zach is going to give me some crystals to bring back to the mainland and help me win a tournament.
Sounds like a pretty good man's video if you want to bring him back.
Yeah, I know. Zach, I got you linked down in the show notes, your Twitter, anywhere else the people can follow around your chill ass vibes.
Yeah, at Zach Toyo. I think that's where you can find me. And I'll be in the Underdog streets with that, probably the FFPC. So, yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Are you going to make a
That's a lot of fun.
content turn like everyone else who wins a tournament? You going to launch your own zenupside.com?
So I have to say, I forgot the weekly walkthrough, Pat, is just, I can't imagine how much time that takes.
It takes a
Silva's
fair amount
not-
of time.
Because when it's not out, we got to wait another 12 hours. So
Yeah, well, that's
It's
like-
been habitual for the past 3 years for me to read Silva's matchup. And
yeah.
I started week one with the weekly walkthrough, and it's become habitual for me too. So that it's just an unbelievable resource. But I'd love to come on and do some drafts.
yeah.
Nice.
This is
Appreciate
actually a
that,
good
man.
question. I'm curious this too. What is your handle on the? I know it on Toyo on FFPC, but what about Underdog?
Yeah, it's for some reason Subfo3. It was SUBFO3 as in sub 4-3 as in the combine.
Oh, I like that.
For some reason that was taken, so I used the Japanese Subfo Stan. So SUBFOSAN. Sort of an odd name, but
Dude, I like it. I like it.
Nice.
Gretch, Pat, anything else from you guys?
I want to say real quick, last thing to wrap up the Omni Cup for anyone who was interested in that. We dropped the link earlier. We're going to start those drafts next Wednesday before you're going to see us again. I got a lot of people last year that were like, I missed out. I didn't get signed up in time. If you're interested, go put your name on the list. If you're not interested at that point, you can drop out later. But wanted to let everyone know that's 5 more days to sign up for that.
There you go, Pat.
Did a pod with Davis and Jacob Sanderson today on the rookie class. Talked kind of more in depth. As Pete mentioned, I did a pod yesterday with Connor Rogers, also talking about the rookie class and getting some kind of additional context. Probably better to start there. It's a little more high level. And then tomorrow, doing a Legendary Sickos episode with Eric Beimfohr, also talking rookies. So lots of rookie talk on the Legendary Upside Podcast Network.
Beautiful. Yeah. As we mentioned, no show next week. I'm taking next week completely off. We'll get back in the lab, touch base, see what we got for you guys later in the month. After that, probably some drafts, probably some more Omni check-ins, all of that good stuff. We can dig into the prospects more, all of that. But appreciate you, and shout out again to all of the winners in the playoff contest. Saw so many screenshots across Underdog, FFPC, all of that good stuff. So appreciate all of you guys for hanging with us, and congratulations on all of the scores. Thank you again to Zach. We'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.